The trial of the engineer, the courtroom on Nexus Prime, stretched like a cathedral of judgment, its crystalline walls rising 300 meters into the artificial sky. 10,000 beings from across the Galactic Confederation filled the viewing galleries, their various forms creating a tapestry of scales, fur, chitin, and synthetic materials. At the center of this grand amphitheater stood a single human woman in restraints, Captain Sarah Chen, Chief Terraforming Engineer of the Human Colonial Authority, kept her shoulders straight despite the weight of the neural inhibitor collar around her neck. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and her brown eyes remained steady as she faced the 7-member tribunal. Each judge represented one of the major species of the Confederation, their elevated platform casting long shadows across the chamber floor. The charges against her were severe. 50,000 beings had died on Kepler-4 for 2b when the atmospheric processes failed catastrophically. The planet's newly established colonies from 6 different species had been wiped out in what the Confederation called the worst terraforming disaster in galactic history, and Sarah Chen, they claimed, was responsible. High Arbiter Vextel, a towering Centaurian with purple skin and 4 arms, read the charges in a voice that echoed through the chamber. Captain Sarah Chen of Earth, you stand accused of sabotage, mass murder, and crimes against galactic peace. How do you answer these charges? Sarah's voice was clear and unwavering. I am innocent of these crimes, High Arbiter. I tried to prevent this disaster. A ripple of angry sounds swept through the gallery. Sarah had been the lead engineer on the Kepler-4 for 2b project, responsible for transforming the rocky world into a habitable paradise. The atmospheric processes she designed had worked flawlessly for 3 years, creating breathable air and stable weather patterns. Then, without warning, they had exploded simultaneously, poisoning the atmosphere and killing every living thing on the planet's surface. The Confederation's investigation had been swift and conclusive. Sabotage devices had been found in the processor, cause devices that bore Sarah's biometric signatures. The evidence seemed overwhelming, but Sarah knew the truth. She had placed those devices as emergency shutdown mechanisms designed to prevent exactly the kind of catastrophic failure that had occurred. Earth's diplomatic corps had worked tirelessly to save her. Ambassador Michael Torres, a weathered man with silver hair, stood in the defendants section wearing the formal blue uniform of the human embassy. Beside him sat Dr. Alina Vasquez, Earth's foremost expert on planetary engineering, and Admiral James Carter, representing Earth's military interests. Ambassador Torres rose to address the tribunal. Honored judges, Captain Chen is one of humanity's finest engineers. She has successfully terraformed 17 worlds without a single accident. The evidence against her has been misinterpreted. High Arbiter Vextel S4 eyes focused on the ambassador. The evidence is clear, human. Your engineers' devices destroyed our colonies. Dr. Vasquez activated a holographic display showing complex atmospheric readings. High Arbiter, if you examine the planetary data from Kepler-4 to b, you'll see dangerous instabilities in the planet's core that began developing 6 months before the disaster. Captain Chen's so-called sabotage devices were actually emergency systems designed to prevent exactly this kind of catastrophic failure. The tribunal's crystalline representative, Judge Resonance of Truth, spoke in harmonic tones that translated through the chamber's systems. These claims are speculation. The devices caused the explosion. This is fact. Admiral Carter stepped forward, his military bearing commanding attention. We request additional time to present our evidence. 3 days to demonstrate that Captain Chen tried to save those colonies, not destroy them. The 7 judges conferred in their respective languages, creating a cacophony of clicks, whistles, harmonic tones, and guttural sounds. After several minutes, High Arbiter Vextal raised his primary hand for silence. The evidence is conclusive. No additional time is granted. The tribunal finds Captain Sarah Chen guilty of all charges. The verdict hit the human delegation like a physical blow. Ambassador Torres shot to his feet. This is not justice. You're executing an innocent woman. But the tribunal was already moving to the final phase. High Arbiter Vextal's voice boomed through the chamber. For crimes against galactic peace and the murder of 50,000 innocent beings, Captain Sarah Chen is sentenced to immediate execution by neural disintegration. Sarah closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them to look directly at the tribunal. You're making a terrible mistake. The planet was dying from core instabilities. I tried to save everyone. The execution platform rose from the floor behind. Her, a sleek metal structure topped with the neural disintegrator. The device looked deceptively simple, a silver arch with focusing crystals that could dissolve. A being's consciousness in seconds. Guards escorted Sarah to the platform as billions of beings across the galaxy watched the live broadcast. On space stations and homeworlds, in mining colonies and research outposts, countless eyes were focused on the human engineer who stood calmly facing her death. Sarah turned to address the camera directly, her voice carrying across the galaxy. To my fellow humans watching this, remember that truth doesn't die with the messenger. The data is in the archives. Someone will understand eventually. She paused, her gaze seeming to look beyond the camera, beyond the courtroom, beyond the planet itself. And to the Confederation, you should have listened to the warnings. The neural disintegrator hummed to life, its crystals glowing with deadly energy. A beam of pure white light struck Sarah Chen, and in an instant, she was gone. No scream, no struggle, just silence. The human delegation stood without a word. Ambassador Torres, Dr. Vasquez, and Admiral Carter walked out of the courtroom in complete silence, their faces showing no emotion. They boarded their ship and departed Nexus Prime within an hour. But something else departed with them. That night, every human colony, research station, and diplomatic outpost in the galaxy went dark. No distress signals, no goodbye messages, no explanations. Humanity simply vanished from galactic communications. On Earth, the Global Council met. In emergency session, Director Sarah Mitchell, head of the Human Colonial Authority, stood before the assembled leaders. They killed Sarah Chen for trying to save lives. She was right about the planetary instabilities, but they wouldn't listen. The room was filled with representatives from every nation and colony. Prime Minister Liu Wei of the Asian Federation spoke first. What do we do now? Director Mitchell's answer was simple and chilling. We disappear completely. They want to judge us without hearing us. Let them exist without us. The order went out through channels no other species knew existed. Every human installation began implementing protocol silence, a contingency plan developed decades earlier. Ships were recalled, colonies evacuated, and all traces of human presence systematically erased. President Maria Santos of the Americas Union asked the question everyone was thinking. What about the other species who depend on our technology? Director Mitchell looked around the room at faces filled with anger and determination. They should have thought about that before they executed an innocent woman. Let them discover what they've lost. Across the galaxy, the first signs of something wrong began to appear. Trade routes that had operated smoothly for decades suddenly experienced navigation failures. Communication networks started developing mysterious glitches. Industrial complexes that had run efficiently for years began showing signs of instability. The Galactic Confederation's leaders initially dismissed these problems as minor technical difficulties. They were still celebrating what they saw as justice served, unaware that they had just made the most catastrophic mistake in galactic history. On a research station orbiting Proxima Centauri, the last human scientist finished uploading data to a secure network before initiating the station's self-destruct sequence. Dr. James Harrison had spent his career studying interspecies cooperation, but now he was helping implement humanity's complete withdrawal from galactic civilization. As he watched the station's systems shut down one by one, he spoke into his personal log. They killed Sarah Chen for trying to save lives. They wouldn't listen to her warnings about planetary instability. Now they'll learn what happens when humanity stops warning them about anything. The research station's lights went out, joining the growing network of dark human installations across the galaxy. In the darkness, something vast and coordinated was beginning to move. The price of silence. 3 weeks after the execution of Captain Sarah Chen, the Galactic Confederation began to realize that humanity's silence was more than just wounded pride. It was the beginning of the largest technological collapse in recorded galactic history. The first major failure occurred on Centauri Prime, the industrial heart of the Confederation. The massive orbital manufacturing platforms that had operated continuously for over a century suddenly began shutting down. Plant managers frantically tried to restart the systems, but the automated networks that controlled everything from raw material processing to finished product distribution had simply stopped responding. Chief Industrial Coordinator Kefmel stood in the primary control room, his forearms working frantically across multiple control panels. Run a complete diagnostic on all systems, he ordered his staff. Find the source of these failures. The response came back within hours, and it was terrifying in its simplicity. The diagnostic systems couldn't find any failures because the systems weren't broken. They were simply no longer connected to the networks that controlled them. Networks that, the engineers now realized, had been maintained and updated by human technicians for decades. Similar reports were flooding in from across the galaxy. The great mining operations in the asteroid belt of Kepler 186 had gone silent. The agricultural processing centers on New Harmony were producing food that was spoiling before it could be distributed. Communication relays that had carried messages across thousands of light years were developing, increasing delays and transmission errors. High Arbiter Vextel called an emergency session of the Confederation Council. The same judges who had condemned Sarah Chen now sat in a chamber filled with reports of system failures, economic disruption, and growing panic among member species. What is the current status of human contact? Vextel asked his intelligence officers. Commander Hickstall, an insectoid being from the Hive Worlds, delivered the report with clicking sounds that the translation system rendered in flat, mechanical tones. No human colony responds to communication attempts. No human ships detected on any trade route. No human personnel report to any joint facilities. Complete communication blackout maintained for 21 standard days. Judge Resonance of Truth's harmonic voice filled the chamber with worry. This cannot be mere protest. The system failures are too widespread, too coordinated. That was when the first major revelation came. Dr. Yilmoth, the Confederation's chief technology analyst, presented findings that sent shockwaves through the assembly. Honored Council, our investigation has revealed that human engineers installed and maintained critical subsystems throughout Confederation infrastructure, not as primary systems, but as auxiliary networks that we now realize were essential for full functionality. The holographic display showed a galaxy-wide map with thousands of connection points, all of them now dark. Humans designed backup, systems for our power grids, maintenance protocols for our life support systems, and coordination networks for our trade routes. When they disappeared, they took this knowledge with them. High Arbiter Vextal S, purple skin darkened with anger. Are you telling me that humans deliberately made us dependent on them? Dr. Yilmoth's response was more disturbing than anyone expected. No, High Arbiter. Our analysis suggests they were genuinely trying to help. These systems improved efficiency and prevented failures. Humans were solving problems we didn't even know we had. The implications were staggering. For over 50 years, as humanity had integrated into galactic civilization, human engineers had quietly improved and maintained the infrastructure that kept hundreds of worlds functioning. They had done it so efficiently and quietly that other species had forgotten how much they depended on human expertise. Then came the message that changed everything. Every communication device in the galaxy activated simultaneously. Personal communicators, public announcement systems, military networks, and diplomatic channels all carried the same transmission. The voice was calm, professional, and unmistakably human. This is Director Sarah Mitchell of the Human Colonial Authority, speaking for Earth and all human colonies. 24 days ago, the Galactic Confederation executed Captain Sarah Chen for trying to prevent a disaster. You ignored her warnings about planetary instability, refused to examine her evidence, and killed her for doing her job. The message continued as billions of beings across the galaxy listened in stunned silence. Captain Chen was right. The disaster on Kepler-4 2b was caused by natural planetary instabilities that she tried to prevent. Her emergency systems were designed to save lives, not take them. She died trying to protect the very beings who condemned her. Director Mitchell's voice remained steady, but there was something implacable in its tone. For 50 years, humanity has worked to improve galactic civilization. We've prevented disasters, solved technical problems, and maintained systems that kept your worlds functioning. We did this because we believed in cooperation and mutual benefit. The chamber where the Confederation Council sat was completely silent. Every judge who had voted to execute Sarah Chen was hearing the truth they had refused to consider. But you have shown us that cooperation requires trust, and trust requires justice. Since you have demonstrated that you have neither, humanity is withdrawing from galactic civilization completely, permanently. High Arbiter Vextal tried to activate the response system, but his communication arrays were no longer functioning. The human message was being broadcast on networks that the Confederation couldn't access or control. As of this moment, all human-maintained systems are being permanently disabled. All human-designed improvements to your infrastructure are being removed. All data regarding human technological contributions is being deleted from your archives. The reality of what was happening began to sink in. Across the galaxy, industrial centers were grinding to a halt. Transportation networks were failing, and communication systems were developing cascading errors. The Confederation was discovering that human engineers hadn't just helped build their civilization, they had become essential to its continued existence. We offered you the data that would have prevented the Kepler-44 disaster. You refused to examine it. Captain Chen died trying to save 50,000 lives, and you executed her for it. Now you will learn the price of refusing to listen. Director Mitchell's final words carried across the galaxy with the weight of absolute finality. Humanity will not return. We will not respond to your messages. We will not provide assistance. When your systems fail, you wanted to judge us without understanding us. Now you can exist without us. The transmission ended, leaving the galaxy in a silence that would soon be filled with the sounds of civilization collapsing. Over the following weeks, the true extent of human integration into galactic infrastructure became apparent. Power grids failed because human engineers had designed the load balancing systems. Life support systems developed dangerous fluctuations because human technicians had maintained the environmental controls. Trade networks collapsed because human mathematicians had calculated the optimal shipping routes. On Nexus Prime, the same world where Sarah Chen had been executed, the atmospheric processes began showing signs of instability. The irony was not lost on anyone. The technology that kept the capital world habitable was failing, and the only engineers who truly understood how to fix it were the humans who had designed the backup systems. High Arbiter Vextel stood in his private chambers, looking out at a city where the lights were beginning to flicker. His aide brought him the final report from their investigation into the Kepler-44 disaster. "High Arbiter," the aide said. "Quietly, we have confirmed that Captain Chen was correct. The planet's core was destabilizing due to natural processes. Her devices were emergency systems designed to prevent atmospheric poisoning. She was trying to save the colonies." Vextel closed his 4 eyes. How many beings knew this? The human delegation presented this evidence at the trial. Dr. Vasquez's data was accurate. We didn't examine it properly. The High Arbiter looked at the datapad showing the evidence that could have saved Sarah Chen's life. Evidence that had been available during the trial. Evidence that had been dismissed without proper consideration. "Send a message to Earth," he said finally. "Tell them we know the truth. Tell them we were wrong." The aide's response was barely audible. "High Arbiter, we can't. All communication arrays capable of reaching Earth are no longer functional. The humans took that capability with them when they left." Vextel turned to look at his city, where the darkness was spreading building by building. The Galactic Confederation had executed an innocent woman for trying to prevent a disaster, and in response, humanity had removed itself from galactic civilization entirely. The price of that injustice was becoming clear. Without human engineers to maintain the hidden networks that kept everything functioning, the Confederation was slowly collapsing. Power systems were failing, communication networks were degrading, and transportation was becoming increasingly unreliable. In the archives deep beneath Nexus Prime, automated systems were deleting the last traces of human technological contributions. 50 years of improvements, innovations, and solutions were disappearing as if they had never existed. The galaxy was being forced to rediscover how to function without the quiet competence that humanity had provided. And somewhere in the darkness beyond known space, human ships were heading for destinations that no other species would ever find. They carried with them the knowledge, skills, and innovations that had once been freely shared with a galaxy that had proven itself unworthy of such gifts. The execution of Captain Sarah Chen had lasted only seconds. the consequences would last for centuries. The Galactic Confederation had learned the hardest lesson in the universe. Some prices are too high to pay, and some mistakes cannot be undone. In the growing darkness of failing systems and collapsing infrastructure, the galaxy would remember the woman they had killed for trying to save lives. And they would understand, too late, that humanity's greatest strength had never been their technology or their ships. It had been their willingness to help, even when no one asked them to. That willingness was gone forever.